All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in for this doula panel discussion on culturally competent birth work. I am your moderator today. My name is Christine Enetak. I am a doula who is trained through Dona International and currently apprenticing through Radiant Roots Network. I am also specialized or will be specializing in preconception and fertility work, as well as bereavement support and surrogacy and adoption as well. So joining me today are three amazing doulas who I will allow to introduce themselves. As the title of the session entails, we are culturally competent doulas who come from diverse backgrounds. I'm a native of Kenya, but have resided in the United States for a little over 20 years and have enjoyed living on the East Coast, in the South, and currently in the Midwest. So we'll start with Allison. Allison, if you could please introduce yourself, give us an idea of what your business is about, what your specialty in doula and birth work is, and your inspiration to become a doula.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Allison Brito, and I have been a birth doula in the Grand Rapids area of Michigan for just over 10 years now. And my specialty, I guess, is mostly birth, but I do some part postpartum work, and more in the last couple of years, I've been doing some mentoring of newer doulas, and that's a passion of mine to help newer doulas really thrive and um, find their confidence in their niche. And what inspired me to be a doula, honestly, was quite a few things. The birth of my own son almost 13 years ago, where I did have a doula, and she ended up being my trainer. So that was really cool. And my sister also is a midwife, and so I've been exposed to the birth world for a long time, but I wasn't really looking to become a doula. My background's more in education and pretty much everything else besides birth work. um, but it just became a passion, and it's been the longest passion I've had now. So,
Thank you so much, Allison. Rokaya.
All right, greetings all. Thank you for having me. My name is Rakaya Ndao, and my first name is Nade, but I go by Rakaya. A lot of people know me by Rakaya. I am a doula, and I've been a doula for the past couple years. I received my training at Rocky Mountain doula services in Denver, Colorado. I'm currently located in Denver, Colorado, but previously I resided in Michigan, in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is where I met our beautiful moderator today. And my specialty has been labor and birth. That's what I've been trained on. However, I'm looking forward to taking the full spectrum training to be able to be more well versed, as well as taking some lactation training in the near future. I actually have trainings happening in a couple weeks here in Denver for lactation. So I'm really excited and thrilled to be participating in that. As far as my background, as far as interest in becoming a doula, I think it started from maybe 5, 10 years ago when I worked in the healthcare field, but more towards working with elderly folks. But I met a few people who I know who were doulas, and they told me about the work. And I found it really interesting because I know that in my country, we don't have doulas, like, or your doula is your mother, your auntie, your sister, somebody who's going along the way with you, helping you when you're giving birth. So I found it very interesting and did my research, and I was like, that's something I really could do and could see myself doing, because I'm always in the world of serving people, working with elderly, working with youth, working with refugees and immigrants. And women have always been like this niche of, this group of people I really had like a really soft heart for, especially with my mom. So wanted to find a way to support and serve women. And I was like, this is it for me. I can totally see myself doing it. And I took the training, and the rest was history.
Thank you so much, Rokaya. Floor, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Greetings. My name is Flor Evans, and many people call me Mama Flor. So, um, the name of my business is Beyond Birth Postpartum Doula, and I specialize in birth and postpartum doula, and also I do the placenta encapsulation. The reason why I became interested in being a doula, um, well, there's many reasons. So I can honestly say that this was my calling from the time I was a child. Um, as a young child, my mom was a doctor and she would send me to go check on some of her patients to see how they were doing, to see if they needed a meal cooked or to see if they needed the house clean. So that's a culture, or at least it used to be where I'm from. I'm from the Dominican Republic. So as a child, my mom trained me to care for others. Little did I know that that was such a thing as doula here in the United States. Then my daughter, she was a doula, and then she became a midwife. So I learned about the classes and things, and I became a doula because of her. Also, just the fact that my daughters, some family members and friends, um, they their birth experience was not the best. They had terrible experiences, so that made me want to learn more, educate myself more, so that I can advocate for them and teach them and let them know that they have a voice. So that's the reason why I became a doula, and I am committed to, to do this job until God calls me home.
Thank you so much, Flor. Thank you, everyone, especially for sharing your heart and your why that called you to this work. I didn't share personally why I felt called to this work. I have always been drawn to reproductive justice and women's health, women's empowerment. But I myself had a pregnancy doula, and after suffering a miscarriage, I didn't know that my doula was full spectrum trained. And so she very quickly transitioned into a bereavement doula. And I was so amazed. I was like, oh, wow, you're going to stay with me? But I lost the baby. I thought our contract is over now. And she said, no, no, I'm here. There's more that I can do for you. And I was so inspired by the support that she gave me. And at the time, we were working virtually, so I didn't even know what that would look like. But she gave me the best experience even from afar, and I was so inspired, especially to stand in the gap with women in those very difficult seasons of pain, because not every pregnancy ends in happiness and joy. So I was truly inspired by her capacity to offer support in that way. So to get us started here, I'm going to pose this question to Rokaya and then Floor. How could other doulas use their voices to advocate for culturally diverse clients in seasons of either infertility, pregnancy, childbirth, or postpartum? Rokaya?
Sorry, I lost my screen there. My apologies. Thank you. Yes, I think that's a very, very great question. And I think for me, it's about learning about other cultures, because cultures are different and people and their practices could be very different from even within a country and within a culture. So making sure that you understand and learn about that specific culture and that person and their preferences, I think has been really helpful for me, especially for the past year where each of my client has been from a different country, from Central America, one from West Africa, and one from East Africa. And each culture has their own specific thing and how individually, how each wants to be treated and what the expectations are. The other point I think will be providing cultural training specific to that population, because learning is always number one, especially when you're working with someone who is from a different background than yours. asking questions, asking a lot of questions. It might seem very hard or difficult for folks to ask questions, but that's really the best way to learn and understand certain things that may not be very familiar to you or foreign to you, instead of assuming. Because once you assume, you may make mistakes and you may cause more damage, more harm than really supporting the client or the person you're working with. Another one is empowering clients with the info that they need to make sure they make the informed decision to know, because they know themselves, they know what is best for them and their bodies. So making sure you empower clients with the necessary information for them to make informed decision for their healthcare and whatever services that they receive.
Wonderful.
One
Mm,
Yeah, I think one more thing that I wanted to add is just making sure we participate in advocacy,
mm.
to make sure that things related to birth justice, especially for communities of color, because we may not change things on a federal level. However, on a local level within your state, you may be able to do some advocacy and have some legislation and policies implemented to make sure they're representative for all people and also supporting all individuals, and providing a testimony, attending legislative sessions, and making sure the policies being made are beneficial for the community.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much, Wakaya. Floor, same question. How could other doulas use their voice to advocate for culturally diverse clients in seasons of either infertility, pregnancy, childbirth, or postpartum?
Yes, I believe that it is crucial that we um, advocate for culturally diverse clients during the seasons of infertility, pregnancy, childbirth, postpartum. Um, and there are some steps that that must take place in order for us to assist them. The first thing will be to educate yourself. As a doula, you must educate yourself about cultural differences, practices, beliefs in others, and traditions related to pregnancy and childbirth. Understanding and respecting your client's cultural background is important. Um, Also, I mean, it is very essential providing cultural sensitive care. um, Number two, listening attentively to your clients, to their experience, their concerns, their needs without judging them. We must always validate their feelings and perspective, and acknowledging the unique challenges they may be facing due to their cultural background. The next thing is establishing an open and honest communication with your clients, making sure that they are heard and understood, using clear and respectful language to convey information to them and support their decision making process. Also advocating for them. It is important that, we advocate for them, and also advocate for inclusive and culturally competent and care within the healthcare system and institutions. If you see something that is not right, especially if it's discriminatory, speak up. Speak up against those practices and policies that may impact your clients in a negative way. And also working in collaboration with cultural liaisons, interpreters, and community leaders to bridge any language barrier that may exist in between you and your clients, and also, the doctors or healthcare workers. This can help ensure an effective communication and understanding on the client. And the last thing I wanted to mention was providing um, resources and support to the clients by offering them access to relevant resources, such as group support, community organizations, and healthcare providers that understand and respect their cultural backgrounds. This can help them um, to feel supported and empowered through our journey. And by taking these proactive steps, I believe that doulas can use their voices to advocate culturally um, diverse clients and create more inclusive, supportive environment for all families during these seasons of infertility, pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum.
Thank you so much. That was so good. Thank you. Our next question will be answered by Allison and Flor. Um, now that we've heard a few examples of how doulas can use their voices, Allison, kick us off by giving us an example of a time when you empowered your clients to advocate for themselves within the American healthcare system.
Yeah. So I like how you put that advocate for themselves, because we do advocate for our clients, but the most powerful thing, which I think both Flora and Rakaya mentioned, but is them knowing that they have a voice and that their voice matters. Um, so one example that I've been getting a lot lately is there's a big push in this area right now to encourage pregnant women to get plan an induction because they have a suspected big baby based on ultrasounds. And I've had a few clients recently where they just didn't really want to do that based on something that is not necessarily something that actually is going to happen or even be a problem if it does happen. And so the way I've helped my clients advocate for themselves is first by providing them really good information. Evidencebasedbirth.com has a whole bunch of free information. Most doulas know about them. Most, obstetric providers also know them. They're pretty respected, but they gather all of the relevant information and put it in a way people can understand and help them make decisions. It doesn't tell people what to decide. But for example, just on that big baby topic, they have a whole signature article, which is a very long article, but you can read the short version too, about how maybe it's not evidence-based to induce just because you suspect that they might have a quote unquote big baby, which for medical providers is over 8 pounds or something like that. Um, one specific example I just had in this last year was I had a client, it was her first baby. She really wanted a natural birth, and um, she and her partner were not comfortable inducing just because the provider was saying that you have a big baby in there. Partly because they did read and they read that those ultrasounds are highly inaccurate sometimes. And partly because they, you know, also were reading and, people can have big babies vaginally. So they ended up, I just encouraged them, we don't speak for them, we don't tell them what to do, but I did encourage, I said, I think that's a very valid choice. And I think you have the right to make that choice. You know, and so they ended up choosing to wait, and she went into labor spontaneously and had a 9 pound baby vaginally naturally. So um first time, and not an overly long labor. So I mean, that's just one example, and they were very happy with their decision. And so just one example where we as doulas, again, we never tell people what to do, but we really do want them to feel like their choices are the most important. Um, because when it comes down to it, they're the ones that are going to have to be caring for for themselves and baby afterwards. So I do always try to emphasize that all the way through pregnancy, during the birthing process, that you're the boss. Like I say that so many times, probably my clients get sick of it, but um they don't get that message always from the hospital systems, which tend to be, at least around here, I don't know how it is in Colorado, but very paternalistic, very top down, very, we're the experts, you should do what we say. But then you might have two providers that might say two different things. So then who do you choose to believe? So it's just very important for people, especially if they're starting out their parenting journey, um, very important for them to understand that they're ultimately, they need to make the decision. They can take all the advice that they want from the medical providers, from their own research, but really at the end of the day, it's their decision. And they should be supported in that decision, even if it's a decision that I wouldn't make or that the medical provider wouldn't make. So that's one specific example, I guess, of the way I've been advocating lately, or helping clients advocate for themselves lately.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate your reference to a credible source of information, because we know nowadays we're inundated with so much information, so much data, and it's critical that we as doulas are leading our clients to the websites and resources that are credible and reliable to make these decisions. Flora, how about you? When was a time you empowered a client to advocate themselves within our healthcare system?
Yes, I had a client who was pregnant with her second child. She she had had a C-section with the first one, and the doctor wanted to do a C-section because she had had a C-section before. So what I did, she was really scared because she did not want to have another C-section. She wanted to try to have the baby naturally. So I provided her the information again, evidence birth. Um, I really love that website. So I provided information to her, and she read it. And then I told her, I said, listen, you have your voice must be heard. Whatever you feel that you learn from this article, you just go when you see your doctor, you let them know that this is not what you want to do. I said it's okay to ask questions. Ask them, like, what is the worst scenario that could happen? Ask them, what are my other options? What could happen if I decide, not to do the C-section? And she even asked what was the percentage that, of her rupture or even dying. And it was a very small percent. I believe she said it was like 1 or 2%. So, that made my client decide that, she was not getting a C-section. And she ended up having her baby. I was there with her for 24 hours in the hospital, making sure that they did not, try to get her to do something that she didn't want to do. But yeah, the most important thing is making sure that they advocate for themselves, because as a doula, if something goes wrong or doesn't go the way that it should, we don't want to tell them what to do and then be responsible for that. But we do want to provide all the tools that they need so that they can make the right choices.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, and just amplifying the fact that the experience of one birth may not be the experience of the next birth, and that each birth is its own journey. And so we know as doulas, we do not work independently of other healthcare professionals. In fact, we are encouraged to partner with community resources and other professionals that offer different types of support to our clients. Rokaya, please, can you tell us how you influence the continuity of cultural competency when referring clients to essential support services, for instance, childbirth education classes, breastfeeding support groups, mental health services, or social services?
Yes, absolutely. I think for me, it's very important to do that research. So I've used that website you've mentioned, Allison, a couple of times, which was really helpful for me and for the client I was supporting, but also for local things, making sure I'm sharing groups in the community, especially those grassroots organizations now that provide childbirth education or breastfeeding classes that specially target BIPOC populations, because the care and the information that they may receive within those grassroots organization may be different than the one that they receive from their normal healthcare provider or whatever hospital they go into to get service. So that's really important for me. And I'm part of a group that's called the Sacred Seed Black Collective that is working on creating a book of resources that really targets BIPOC clients, for them to have resources related to mental health, lactation support, clothing for once they give birth, to make sure they have access to that, bereavement, all those things that, you know, someone who's pregnant may eventually need, and making sure that that information is accurate, and, you know, the vetting process has been done accordingly. When it comes to mental health and social service providers, the list of providers is very limited, and, you know, sometimes hard to guarantee that the type of training those providers have received is, you know, they culturally competent. It's really hard to vet that. So we just do our best and provide the information that we can provide and update as much as possible. And I think the last thing is making sure clients know their rights, and also that they have the right to ask for an interpreter when seeing a provider or receiving care. Because sometimes, for example, when my last birth, one of my the client spoke limited English, and one of the nurses came in and asked, and she was, yeah, the new nurse that came in was, it was her shift, and it was her first time taking care of my client. And when speaking to the client, she asked the client if she spoke English, and the client said yes. And she just started just going on and on and on, and just saying, you know, just explain what she was going to do. She was going to give him X medication, blah blah blah. And the client was just looking at her, and it was like, ma'am, can you just please allow the client to use an interpreter? Because yes, she does speak English, however, it is best for her to have an interpreter to make sure she understands everything that is going for her care. And the client too asked me to do, and the reason why I was able to do that and also advocated for that is because the client and I spoke the same language. So I was speaking French. My client, it was a French speaker, and I was able to ask for an interpreter because they wanted to use me as an interpreter. And when I asked the client, they were saying that yes, you could use me, the doula, as an interpreter, but it's good also to have an interpreter. And just in case the interpretation wasn't good enough per se, having me make sure that the proper information was being given. So I think those were some just good points for me to share when it comes to influencing cultural competency when referring clients.
Yeah, and I think you just reminded me of a subtle point that in some cultures, the language that exists around reproductive health is very complex and the average person doesn't know it. And in some languages, it's not a direct translation. So you'd almost have to describe an organ, describe a medical procedure. There is no direct medical word in the language that you're trying to translate or interpret rather. And so I think you were wise in even asking for another person who you could, you know, bounce information on about vocabulary in French and cultural relevance. Sometimes you have to insert your voice and say, hey, this is the voice of the interpreter. I would like to ask for clarification because of XYZ. So having an extra voice is definitely very wise. And another thing you also mentioned, Wakai, is that we cannot guarantee the same level of cultural competence with our community partners, but we can do our best in the vetting process. So just making sure our clients understand, I'm not offering you a foolproof experience with anybody else outside of my care, but I will do my best to vet spaces that are as safe for you as possible. That's why empowering them to use their voice is so critical. So thank you so much, Rakaya. Allison, how do you influence the continuity of cultural competence with community partners for your clients when you do referrals?
Well, just like Rokaya said, we have limited time and limited people in the community, so it's not going to be perfect. I just want to echo that. But some of the things that we do in our network and in my personal business is we do keep a running list of community resources. So whether that's breastfeeding support people, counselors, all those kind of complementary services that people need in pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And what I do is I only include people that have been specifically like mentioned by my clients or my doulas or somebody I trust. And then we keep track if we ask for feedback from the clients when they go, and we say, hey, you can help future people if you'll give me your honest feedback on these people. We don't always, again, it's not a perfect process, but we do try to keep track of that. And if we hear something really not great, then we will take them off our referral list. Because anybody can do a Google search for counselor near me or lactation consultant near me. We really want to send people to providers that they'll be offered quality care and safe care. So that's one thing we do, is keep that kind of running referral list that's a short list of people that we have at least somewhat vetted. And I actually have one of my apprentices who's our resource referral person, so she keeps that for me. And our future goal is to have all clients meet even just for 15 minutes with that resource navigator, because that way they can have that personalized back and forth. Okay, who would be good for you? Let's call them right now. let's because another barrier that we see a lot is just if you just give someone a list or a name or a number, especially if they're postpartum, it's just very daunting sometimes to reach out to that, and especially if they don't speak the language. Anyway, so just trying to soften the road for people as much as possible. Um, and then I have had the opportunity to meet with specific providers in the community, even if it's just a Zoom meeting, you can catch some vibes. You can ask them about their experience and their expertise and get to know them a little bit more. So I can't do that for all our providers on our referral list, but I do try to do that for people that we use a lot. So a big example I would say is lactation support for us. Just really making sure that we get good people if they're going to bother to ask for that help and go that direction, then I want it to be quality and culturally competent. So
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. And so one of the common themes that I'm hearing is how we minimize bias for the providers that we are working with, and even sometimes for our clients towards the system, because sometimes they could have heard such horrific stories or unpleasant experiences within their community that it jades them before they even encounter their providers. And so trying to help them process that so that they have an open mind to make those more sustainable, healthier relationships with their individual providers. So I guess this renders really good to my final question in wanting to find out how each and every one of you minimizes your own implicit bias. We know that as culturally competent, emotionally intelligent practitioners, that we are not devoid of implicit bias. So what would you say are ways that you all identify your personal biases or assumptions, and how you could empower other doulas who are watching to commit to a lifelong learning of cultural competency? Flora, I'll go to you next.
Sorry. Okay, so I'm from the Dominican Republic. So as a doula, I understand the importance of reflecting my practice to identify personal biases and assumptions. One example is how I do regularly. I do ask for feedback from families that I work with. I want to know how their experiences went, and I tell them to be honest with me and tell me, because that's the only way that I can learn. And this helps me to see where my own bias are, um, maybe influencing my interactions with the clients, and that allows me to make sure that we can make adjustments to better be able to support my clients. So I always tell them it doesn't matter, what happened. I want to know good, bad, and ugly. Tell me, give me your feedback, because that's the only way that I can learn, and be better as a doula with my clients, do a better job with them.
That's so good. Thank you, Flora. Rokaya?
Sure. I mean, I do echo what Flora said. And, you mentioned it too, Christine. We all have biases. And for me, doing that internal work is really critical for me to undo certain things that are ingrained because of society or because how I was raised, as a young African girl, as a Muslim girl. We each have our own little background sometimes that shows up in our lives. So just making sure I'm consistent within that work and not allow those biases to cloud my judgment or even affect like my client and the care that I'm providing, because that's really important. I don't want to. I mentioned it earlier, like causing harm, and we can inadvertently cause harm when we thought that we're trying to help or support. Cultures are really different, and each individual is unique. So asking questions directly to the person, right? Asking what is okay, what is not okay, learning and researching, educating myself. I've been listening or trying to listen to more podcasts these days when time allows, because it's another thing, right? We do want to learn, we want to educate ourselves, but sometimes finding the time to plug it in can be difficult or challenging. But however, being intentional about, what I need to learn about X, Y, and Z, especially when it comes to culture, and like diversity, equity, and inclusion, because a lot of things are changing within that realm. But now, how it interacts with like the service that I provide when it comes to providing care, doula care, or postpartum care to my client. And I think another thing that's helped me was maintaining relationships built with those clients and having them as cultural allies, because I can tap into them to help me understand some cultural thing or even give me some tips about how some things are done within their culture when it comes to birth, labor, lactation, postpartum and things like that. You can learn a lot from people because they come with a wealth of knowledge. I don't know everything, so they can teach me stuff too. So making sure I keep them as allies and friends to help me grow.
That's so good. Thank you. Thank you, Allison.
Yeah, I love that. I'll just echo what Rokaya said. Well, both of you. First of all, it's really important that we just acknowledge if you don't think I'm talking to doulas who might be listening here, if you don't think you have bias, then you got a lot of work to do. But there's hope. So I would say for people who are newer to like you don't naturally have a diverse friend group or circle of influence, I would say really important to do some official training. Do some, it's not a, no, never a problem to do some DEI trainings, to do some implicit bias trainings. You can search them up online. You can do learn, I would encourage you to learn about the history of obstetrics in America and learn about the disparities that are happening right now, especially among people who are pregnant, birthing, and postpartum. So I think just information, like that's kind of been a theme here, I guess. Getting the right information is a good start. And then I would stay after that, stay humble, stay curious, and just expect that you're not going to always get it right. You're going to make mistakes. I've put my foot in my mouth many a time. And yeah, I love that idea, Rukaya, of using your clients as the experts in we never want people to feel like they're being tokenized either. Like, please speak for all of your people group, however, they can give some amazing insight and especially if there's like a culture or a background that we're just really not familiar with, which has happened to me sometimes, and I've had to do, like I said, my own research and stuff like that. But yeah, I would say a big part is just self-awareness and attitude, because people can tell when you're genuine. And so um it's you'll do less harm, if we're talking about harm, um if you're genuinely curious, even if you don't have all the facts. Like you're not gonna be able to crash course your way into every culture that you might serve. but but with all the things that like Flora and Rukaya already said, asking questions, just really trying to be curious and finding out more, that will go a long way to gain trust and to make them feel safer.
Thank you so much. Wow. I have personally been inspired this evening by each and every one of you. I've left with at least one takeaway, but we're just going to do a final round robin of one takeaway you want people to walk away from this session. Just one nugget that you can think of, be it something somebody else said or something you said. But for me, what I would say is be flexible and open to unlearn what you know to make room for what you don't know. And I got that from Rokaya in the sense that you can learn from anybody. We too are learning alongside our clients. So just remaining open to unlearn and learn what you need to accommodate the next good experience for your client. Flor, what is one nugget you want to leave us with that you gained today?
I learned a lot from all of you. Um, yeah, it's unlearning things that you thought you knew. Never assume that you know somebody's culture, because even like I can say in the Dominican Republic, there's cultures in all different parts of the country, the south, the north, the east, and the west. Even the way they cook could be completely different from one town to the other. So just don't think and assume that because you are from a place that you know everything. There's always room to learn something, and that's something that I will take with me. Don't assume, ask, learn. It's okay to say I don't know, tell me, educate me. So just ask, educate yourself in what you don't know.
Absolutely. Rokaya?
Sure. I think on top of all that, and I absolutely agree with what you said, Christine and Flor, I'm very, how can I say this? I really want to encourage people to be more engaged in policy making. I know it's not for everybody, but trying to find ways to, even if you have to do a testimony, go there, attend, a legislative session and provide your testimony when some bills are being written when it comes to reproductive justice, because a lot of things when it comes to our bodies are being threatened, and it's important for us to be very proactive and really get out there and make sure that whatever decisions are being made, whatever policies are being written, are not damaging to our communities. And we only us and the clients can go out there and make sure we're advocating for ourselves, because others are not going to do it for us. So I encourage us to just look into more advocacy work and being involved in policy making.
That's so good. Allison?
Oh man, I loved everything everybody said. um, I think one thing that we didn't talk about this as much, so I'll just highlight it. I think Flor mentioned it, but speaking up when we see things happen in the moment. That doesn't necessarily have to be getting in a doctor's face and saying you're racist, but it can be affirming in front of the medical provider, affirming to your client, that's actually great. That's reasonable. Sometimes I will just um turn right to them and speak to them and not speak to whoever it is that's being inappropriate or violent. Um, Not physically violent usually, well, but so I think that that's, on the one hand, it's very drilled into us as doulas that we don't speak for our clients and we're not really, all that stuff. However, if we see some things that are blatant and harmful, then I do think we have a responsibility, like I think it was Florida that said, um, that because sometimes we're the only witness. And so that carries some responsibility, and being able to be prepared to say something, even if it's not perfect, because sometimes I'm honestly, when things happen, sometimes I'm a little surprised or taken off guard and I don't always know exactly what to say, but being prepared to really hold space for people when they're not being treated fairly.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. It just speaks to the bravery sometimes that comes with the responsibility of being a doula, and the grace that we are not always perfect. Sometimes you may address something a few minutes after it happened, but we too are human, and we are going through the same human reactions as our client, sometimes at the same time, but then we have to almost snap out of it, reach back into our toolbox of training and resources, and continue the advocacy journey. So I hope each and every one of you is finding ways to care for yourselves as you serve in this capacity. I hope that you're finding moments of restoration and rest, and that you're prioritizing your care as much as you are that of your clients. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for all you are doing. We will be sure to share each of our businesses along with this recording and the promotion for this program this evening. So thank you all for being here, and I look forward to a lasting relationship with each and every one of you. Thank you.